collegiate athletics at Penn State. And they will delve into the topic of diversity and inclusion within collegiate athletics and share the impact of belonging in the journey toward a more equitable and inclusive space for college athletes, coaches, and staff. So thank you three for taking the time to share with all of us today. We're really looking forward to it, and I will pass the baton over to you all.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Anna. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm just really excited to be here. And I'm going to take this opportunity, since I get to be the lead off, to welcome everybody. I want to thank our sports performance team for sponsoring and doing all the heavy lifting with the next 2 days. And certainly want to publicly thank all of the units that make up our performance team, because as we have traveled the path through this pandemic the last 14, 15 months, they have been our bedrock. They have really been obviously at the core of health and safety in a worldwide pandemic and public health crisis, and have seen to it that health and safety of our student athletes, our coaches, and all of our staff have been at the forefront. So again, as I kind of look across the screen and I see obviously members of our ICA, our coaches, but also our fellow folks across the Commonwealth and our Commonwealth campuses, and it's just a thrill to be together, and particularly given the subjects and the topics that we're going to take on over the course of the next 2 days. So I'm thrilled to be leading off the summit with our belonging, equity, and inclusion presentation. Obviously, belonging broadly and equity and inclusion more specifically are so important to all organizations, and it's because of our people and the importance of the health and safety and the outlook of our people, and therefore it's critical that leadership embraces getting better in this area. And be more inclusive, be more equitable, and more welcoming for all. So every day we have to take this on as part of our organization, as part of the what's in our hearts and the core of what we do organizationally, and it must be embraced and supported from the top. Otherwise, it's not perceived as valued by all. It's not necessarily perceived as important, and as we'll talk about and continue to talk about today, it is. I'm honored and excited to be joined today by Natalie and Christina. I think this highlights the reach across ICA and across our campus that is necessary to effectively pursue the goal of belonging. So to that end, it's a journey. And obviously here we see talking about getting moving along that journey. It's something that we're always on our way to, always working our way down the tracks. And kind of mentioning tracks, we're going to, Natalie and Christina and I are all going to use the train analogy today, talking about the path, the tracks, the engineer, the stations along the way. The train maybe gets a little off track at some point. Maybe that train was speeding, maybe it was going too fast. But we're also going to talk about the ticket takers, the station managers, and of course the passengers. The most important thing is that we get moving, is that we get going and we keep moving on that journey down the tracks. So again, it obviously is a journey, one that's not perfect. No person, no organization is, but the important thing is that we get moving, that leadership embraces it, that belonging, equity, and inclusion are embraced as a value, and that it's by leadership, it's articulated early and often, and then backed up with action. Backed up with both personal and organizational action through hiring, through accountability, and through every action that we take. You also see here our success with honor statement. I won't call it a motto. It's really a statement, and for Penn State, that's been our statement for a long time. And it's about honor in all things. Honor in academics, honor obviously in the competitive aspect of our athletics, honor in character development, social responsibility, and honor in humanity, which again, that's what we're really talking about here as it relates to belonging. How we show up and invite others to show up as well. So let's get going on this journey. We're moving, and I will pass the baton.
Thanks, Sandy. So we're moving, and it's such an honor to be here with you, kind of moving on this journey. I think that when we have a little bit of this positive energy going, similar to, Josh playing some music just as we entered the room, and we can kind of feel like a little bit of anticipation, like, where are we going to go? This might be exciting. It might be a little bit scary. I would encourage you to just reflect a bit on what you hope a presentation like this might mean to you. What would make you feel inspired to make sure that you are doing this success with honor in your own life? What would make you feel as though you're having more information than maybe you had before, maybe a different skill than you had before around how to create a more inclusive and equitable environment? Who is on your train? Who's there automatically that helps you to be equitable and inclusive in your daily work? Who needs invited? Who's someone who maybe you hadn't thought automatically is part of your journey, but that you really hope feels invited? And that person may be you. I think sometimes we can find ourselves more passive in this experience than we really want to be. So think about, printing off your own kind of ticket to ride today. Like, what is it that you would need to feel part of this conversation? It can be so tempting to multitask and do a lot of different things, but I'd encourage you to use the opportunity today to really think about how to, feed your own fire, how to maybe put yourself in the driver's seat if you feel like you're typically a passenger in an experience like this, and then how you can use what you learned today to inspire all the teams you're a part of. I don't know that there is a more inclusive group that I've been a part of at Penn State than sports performance. Talk about feeling really included right away. And I just hope that we can share that same experience with you through the course of our presentation. So I'll pass the baton.
Thank you, Natalie. Finding my mute button as always when shared screen. It's all good. Christina, I know that I do want to express that very thankful for this opportunity. I am presenting with incredible superstars. So Sandy and Natalie, thanks for letting me join you. And Dr. Nelly, thank you for having us on here. We are totally pumped to be here. But touching on belonging, I love this word. I love the idea of, when you walk into a room, do you feel like you should be there? And on the reverse side, when someone does walk in, are you including them? Do they feel a connection and an ability to be there and a right to be there? So this first bullet kind of goes into the mission of the sports performance team, but a couple of words that I want to point out is educating and mentoring. Okay, we are in higher education. Our priority is to educate, not only those that we are working with, and in here you can see that it's not just dedicated to student athletes. We're coaching our coaches, our service providers, our administrators, our staffs, and ourselves. And that education piece should be both. And we'll talk a lot about that in a little bit. And then not only is it just performance, it involves health, it involves the welfare development. So it is in essence, it is inclusion. We are trying to develop the whole self. And then it tags along with our mission as ICA is to prepare our student athletes for a lifetime of impact. So knowing that and moving forward with the sense of belonging and inclusion, how are you finding ways to create that? Not only for your staffs or your student athletes or your teams, but also for yourself. I love, Verna Myers is a diversity and inclusion trainer, and her tagline really is diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. And I absolutely love that line. I love to dance, so totally bought in, love music. So Nellie always gets me going on every single sports performance call by providing the music. But I do think that that is a big deal. Yes, you're bringing people in, but are you interacting with them? Do they feel like they can be in the party and belong there? And these are questions that shouldn't just be a yes or no. I want you to take the time to reflect on it and think, well, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And how do you, and what is your why in that piece? Why do some feel excluded in these scenarios or all the time? And how do we bring those people in? With belonging and inclusion, I would touch on the communication piece, and we'll dive into that a little bit more as well later on. But communication isn't just a spoken word. It is your body language. It's your nonverbals that you present. So do your actions match what you're saying every single day that you're living? Do you create that sense in the room that you walk into and walk out of? You know, what is the difference in both of those? And again, I would ask that you take the time to reflect. And you'll see throughout our presentation that we present questions throughout, and it's definitely not for you to answer right now. We definitely want you to take some time to think about it and get some feedback from people that you trust that will know, can answer truthfully, and give you some ideas to then carry on later. Passing it.
Thanks, Christina. You know, as we're putting this together, we're thinking about the journey and the train analogy. But I think, you know, early on in this, we have to acknowledge that there is no perfect destination. And I love the little, I think it's Thomas the Train, that, you know, is running off the tracks there. You know, even early on, we have to acknowledge that there will be times when the train gets off the tracks. You know, again, whether it's the engineer has it going too fast, or whether there's a flaw in the rail. You know, so it is no perfect destination. I'm sorry, no perfect journey. And frankly, there really is no fixed destination. You know, again, you know, get moving and get headed in the right direction. We'll get off track on an occasion, and the important part is, how do we course correct? It's part of the journey. And, you know, what are our foundations to rely on to get ourselves back on track? And obviously, kind of some of the definitional things that we all talk about help us to understand, you know, back where we should be. But we have to establish norms in our organization to be able to kind of know where the guide rails are to get us back on campus. You know, how are detours addressed? How are they addressed by leadership? How are they addressed by peers? And what tools and resources can we rely on? We absolutely have to have tools and resources within the department, and many of that, like most things, are about our people. You know, our people can be our resources to help us course correct. Christina mentioned, you know, who are those trusted people that either will come to you and say, hey, you know, that was out of line, or you ask them, hey, how am I doing on this? That's so important that we all have that. We cannot go it alone. You know, who or what organizationally are you counting on? You know, none of us know everything. I certainly don't know everything, and particularly in this area. So you know, no one does, and obviously acknowledging that is a first step. And where are our resources and our people that we count on? And in terms of course correcting, you know, what priority is held by the organization in terms of getting that train back on the track, heading back on the proper journey. So I encourage and we encourage each of you to be thinking about how these elements show up in your life and in your organization, and as the journey continues, how you get back on track when we get off a little bit, because it will happen.
Thanks, Sandy. So, as Sandy was just stating, you know, this idea of there not being a perfect destination is, I think, one that can be a little bit hard to get our heads around, especially if we're a goal-oriented person. And I know a lot of times in athletics, you know, broadly defined, it's normal to be goal-oriented. You know, we can get very focused on a certain outcome. When I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think it's so important to reframe our sense of what would be a successful goal or a successful trip. Did you look out the window and see things in a different way? Did you gain a new perspective? Did you sit next to somebody who might have been someone who you wouldn't typically sit next to and learn something about them and about yourself? What would be your primary ways to measure success that might be very divergent from the typical way that you do? That to me is the measure that we want to be looking at here, as well as recognition of how to get this train back where you want it to be. So you think about all of those times where perhaps we've erred or something hasn't gone the way we wanted to with diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And, you know, I like that Keith Embray talks about not being performative, but really being value-centered and integrated about how we do this work. So if you think about a performative effort, it might be somebody looking like they're trying to lift up a train and put it back on the track, as opposed to like actually getting everybody where they need to be. Okay, let's kind of like all come off. Let's, you know, let's get around a map. Let's try and figure out what we need to do differently. Let's figure out where this broke. And then let's kind of get ourselves, you know, headed again in this right direction. When someone lets us know that we're even starting to veer off track, one of my favorite techniques is to express some gratitude to them. It can be really hard to tell someone that perhaps there's a little bit of mission drift, or perhaps something we're doing is setting us a little bit, you know, in a potential, maybe not the right direction. So that can help us from fully leaving the tracks. And then I like to think about kind of going back to basics. For the train analogy, that might be back to the roundhouse. Like, let's get reoriented again. Let's kind of talk to our navigators, figure out where things need to go next, and then let's get back on board and try again. Every day that something is hard for us, and I think we've all experienced this in COVID, I like to have a moment of just saying like, oh, well, okay, well, we'll try again tomorrow, because that's what we're all trying to do, is every day course correct and get a little bit closer to where we want to be. So I'm hopeful that some of those pieces might give you a little bit of food for thought with regard to the fact that it's inevitable. Our train's going to go off the track sometimes, and how we can help each other. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. So going into thinking about this train analogy. So I want you to go ahead and think about, you know, who's on this train. Natalie had asked this question to me, where do I see myself? I see myself as always trying to get the train moving forward. Okay, so I'm looking for someone that can help me identify where there are gaps in my train, because all I'm trying to do is keep it going forward. So for me, that's what I'm looking in to fill and make sure that our train is actually getting to the destination that then continues to move forward, right? So investing in yourself and your team. I think one, you identify who you have and where your gaps are. You know, do you need a conductor? Do you need a navigational piece? Do you need someone that can help with the couplings because we don't have enough trains, or our caboose got left behind and we got to go get it? So finding those people, and then, you know, evaluating and knowing that we're going to fail, and we're going into this and we know we're going to get off track, and accepting that and being able to then balance that with, you know, for us, it could be the mentoring, it could be professional development, and skill building to gain the knowledge in order for us to continue moving forward. So we're slowing down our train, but we're still moving forward in the fact that we're providing that mentoring piece. And then bringing in the belonging part is letting that person know that we're here to support you. I think these are some really powerful sentences that Sandy actually did provide, and it was, I believe in you and you're here for a reason. That's incredible to me, is knowing that, okay, this person has my back when I fail and I can keep going, and I know they're going to pick me up. And it allows me to take some risk and try new things. I mean, that to me is sport, right? You know, I'm always looking for the kid that's starting the drill. You know, they're willing to take the risk and look like they don't know what they're doing and just try it out first. That's the person that I'm looking for, that at least then knows that I'm going to take this risk, but I know I believe in myself to try and do this and teach myself a new task or a new skill. And then that last bullet and the opportunity to insert "and" into the conversation, I would challenge you to write some of your conversations down and see when you're using "and" when you're using "but." So again, going back to the belonging piece and inclusion, but doesn't allow that, and does, right? So if someone's coming to you with an idea, are you saying that's a great idea, but, or are you allowing the and piece and finding ways to include that person and that idea into the conversation, into your program, and finding ways to make it work. And then sometimes they might be a bad idea. Okay. But we can dissect it a little bit and find, again, you're including them in the conversation so that they continue to come to you and bring ideas, right? I will say for me, a personal experience, I'm 6 days on the job on my new position. I was the director of operations for softball program here. And while it has been only a few days, it has been an incredible experience for me to feel included in the conversation. And hats off to our leadership team, management team, and Sandy, who's my new supervisor. And she didn't know I was doing this, so we'll just let her slide, but has been unbelievably inclusive and let me feel like I belong in this conversation, which, that doesn't always happen. And I would challenge you all to kind of consider that. And the same she might feel that way for me, of knowing that she's asking me for ideas and I'm loving it. But that's the same for you. Go into your groups, go into your teams, ask questions, hear it, and reflect back on it, and continue that conversation and try to input and into it. Passing it. Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks, Christina. I love the and. I think it is such a powerful thing. I'm going to talk about language in a little bit, but just that concept of the using the and instead of the but. It's Christina's comment about ideas, and it might not be a great idea. That's not true. Every idea is a great idea. It just maybe hasn't found its place yet. So not unlike sport. Not unlike, I know we've got a number of our coaches, both from University Park and across the Commonwealth with us today. And so, we talk about, we thought it was important to introduce those training fundamentals. And, as I've been listening to my fellow panelists here, obviously, we're talking about belonging, we're talking about equity and inclusion, but so much of what we're talking about is really fundamental to high performance. And we just happen to be talking about high performance as it relates to belonging. But what are your training fundamentals? What are your personal training fundamentals? And probably more importantly to this conversation, what are your organization's training fundamentals, and what does it mean to return to base? What is it? How do you manage an injury? And when I say injury, maybe it's a misstep as it relates to belonging. And again, we're talking about having people in your camp that are going to help you course correct, or that you can go to, and it's so important. I think one of the absolute fundamentals, most important fundamentals, particularly as you're talking about inclusion and belonging here, is to ask for feedback. And I'll put a slash there, be open to feedback, because hopefully we all have people in our lives that are willing to come to us and tell us when we've gotten off the tracks a little bit. Obviously, there's an art to how you do that, but I think that's really, really important. We have to be constantly assessing, constantly evaluating, constantly learning, striving to get better in all areas. But again, we're talking particularly today about belonging. And so we're constantly striving to be more welcoming for all, to have more of our organization, our friends, our family, people that we come in contact with in every way in our life, having them belong, having them feel that they belong. So what are those musts? obviously, the feedback piece. And part of being open to feedback is being vulnerable. Will I be judged? And what does being judged really mean? I think that's an important part of being vulnerable and being open to taking those risks. Understanding that we are better together. That it is, it's taking our multiple talents to the benefit of, as we talk about it in Penn State athletics, to the benefit of our one team. It's continuing to gain knowledge, practice those new skills, acquire them, practice them, grow them. And as has been mentioned by both Natalie and Christina, investing in yourself first, because that's going to help you to invest in others, and also it's going to help others invest in you. And then it's that the little train that could. I don't know that that's the analogy we're using today, but it's the try again, and it's the keep showing up. I think that is absolutely one of the key fundamentals here as we're talking about creating these inclusive and welcoming communities. So, Natalie?
Thanks, Sandy. I really appreciate that concept of just continuing to show up. I think we're on the next slide, Christina. Thanks. So this idea of, this train analogy and then this concept of training, I think is really helpful to sort of marry the two concepts together, especially for high performance. So, we have to keep doing this. And I often will say to someone who's, trying to write a dissertation or do a project that feels endless, like sometimes we just have to keep throwing time and energy at it. I know that feels really hard to hear, but that's sort of the task before us. And to get better at anything means the same for us. So if we want to become better at inclusivity and we want to become better at equity principles, we have to remind ourselves that we are not always passengers. Sometimes we are, and sometimes that's a part of our process and we might be observing, but sometimes we have to really ask ourselves, was that an opportunity and did I just let it pass me by? Was there a group meeting to talk about something and did I choose not to go? And why might that have been? Or was there even just a small group discussion that I couldn't see myself in? And what would it have meant for me to just say to myself, I belong there. Like, I'm a Penn Stater, like I belong in that space too. I want to hear kind of how I can contribute there. So we have to work, I think, to create that space for ourselves. We have to work to create it for others. So this is sort of all of our responsibility to look around the rooms where we're finding ourselves consistently and see who doesn't contribute, who sits outside the circle. Why might that be? How can we invite people into the circle? What are the structural things we could do in our day-to-day to make sure that perhaps there isn't always a circle and a smaller circle and an inner circle? Can be really, really easy to unconsciously create those inequitable systems. And as Sandy was saying, like the principles she just went through on that last slide, those are all ways to kind of actively work against the sort of spaces that we don't want to have that might be inequitable. A lot of people talk about safe spaces, that perhaps there's a space that they're a part of and they want to be more engaged, but they just don't feel safe there. And one of my colleagues at CAPS, Laura Briscoe, brought a wonderful article to us about brave spaces and the importance of taking up space and perhaps allowing yourself to feel a little bit vulnerable, but also feeling brave. And I know a lot of times folks earlier in their career can talk about, oh, I don't belong there, or I'm not sure, or I'm sure there's somebody who's smarter than me that, should have a seat at the table. Just encouraging folks to have that bravery to take up space and then making sure you're opening the circle when they do. And that just might mean eye contact to really acknowledge that, yes, you belong here. It takes a lot of courage to go where you've never gone. So a lot of times when we think about, getting our ticket and leaving the station, sometimes we're saying we're not really sure where this train is headed, but we want you on board. We want you to be part of this journey with us. And so I think that's the real strength in numbers and strength in team that we're driving home. Thanks, Christina.
Thanks, Natalie. So to keep moving forward and keep this train moving in the direction we have it going, we want to be able to have knowledge, have skills, and awareness and attitudes, right? So I might be extremely knowledgeable in navigation, but then we get there and there's weather and there's different terrains that we have to adjust to. And so that the application of it is different than just having that knowledge. So I might need some skills and awareness of different items to be able to keep this train moving forward. So I love what both Natalie and Sandy have shared, both in that specific piece of you got to have courage to just go for it. And for the little engine that could, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. You have to at least go for it and try and be brave in that piece. And it's going to be uncomfortable and it's okay. You know, that's growth. And as one of my most favorite people say, we can do hard things. So today, right now, you're here, you're learning. It's a new opportunity to gain new information and reflect on what you automatically choose as your attitudes and your values and develop new skills. You know, for me, I'm thankful that you all are here. I think we have about 100 people in it. I'll take out Natalie and Sandy because they had to be here. So we've got 98 people here that are learning and finding different ways to view these opportunities. You're increasing your understanding, and that in turn improves your skills, but also will improve those that you work with every day, whether it's colleagues, those that you supervise, and in the same piece, managing up. I pass it on to Sandy.
And you do that, Christina, quite well. You know, Christina talked about knowledge, skills, and that attitude and awareness, and kind of keeping that all in balance. Otherwise, it's not going to be the round wheel that the train needs to apply to the track. So that all shows up in your language. And all three of us have talked about language a little bit, whether it be body language, and Natalie just referenced, you know, eye contact. All of this is so important, and you know, how you stand in a room towards the door, and you know, is that are you welcoming others in, or do you have your back to the door as people come in? So all of this shows up in spoken, written, spoken, body language. You know, it's really keyed by your self-awareness and emotional intelligence. All contribute to using inclusive and welcoming language and gestures that fuel our train down the track and to that belonging destination, if you will. So, you know, what sort of language may be unintentionally exclusive? I mean, you've got to put yourself in other people's shoes. You've got to have these conversations, sometimes these difficult conversations, and be open to and make it clear that you want this feedback that we've been talking about. So again, this is not just about the spoken word. I'd certainly encourage, this is a little shout out and tip of the cap to our professional communications panel tomorrow at 3 o'clock as part of the summit. But you know, think about the teams that you've been on. We've, you know, everybody here has been teams, whether you want to consider your organization a team or literally the teams that we work with. And you know, what made you feel welcome? What made you feel like you belonged at the table? And who does it well? And let's have a conversation with them about what their, you know, how they got there, how they acquired that skill or that mindset. How do they use micro affirmations and micro validations in communication that are all so important in continuing us to move in a positive direction down this track. So obviously all of these steps, actions, and recognition that include language of some sort help lay the track for as smooth a journey as we possibly can have. And obviously the journey is made more challenging maybe made more difficult if the destination is somewhere we've never been before. Because of how we approach that, maybe with a little bit of trepidation, and that's where the bravery and the courage comes in. We might be a first-time engineer on the particular journey, and we need to be able to lean on our training, lean on our resources, and lean on each other. So thank you, Natalie.
Thanks, Sandy. I appreciate so much of your lead up there, and I do think about micro affirmations and micro validations, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the communication talk tomorrow, but as just laying really, really good tracks for your train to be able to travel on, is that's sort of those foundational pieces. And how you can think about making sure your train is in good working order, that everything is operated the way it should, that everything's oiled. And those are the pieces that we all have some power to do something different about. It can be easy to focus on when things go awry, how we're going to get things back, which I really appreciate conceptually. And then I also think, what can we be doing actively to kind of keep us moving in the right direction and keep this train in good working order. So I really appreciate that. So there's work to do. I hope that part of your attending today has been to get a little bit energized about the fact that there's more to know. There's more people to be included in the conversation than are there right now, that's part of all of our responsibility, and that we can create a more equitable space by doing so. We can be closer to our mission that we all feel really strongly about. So I hope you feel empowered to leave here today and maybe look up something that you hadn't looked up before, to maybe inquire with a colleague, exactly as Sandy said, like ask, how am I doing? Like, they were talking about all the inclusivity stuff. How do you think we're doing? How do you imagine I'm doing? You see me in team meetings. Think about honoring difference and then creating space. I like this as a soccer term, kind of where isn't there space and where can you create some space to have more equity and inclusivity in your systems. And I really just encourage you to get engaged. If you have not felt welcome at the table, like I'm pulling up a chair, I really want you at the table. I want to hear from you. And I know we all do. So I hope that you can take the opportunity to leave and do something you haven't done before. Thanks.
So we're going to wrap up with homework. I know, the worst, but I love to give homework. So I would encourage you, you will have access to the slides. So there are, like we said, there are questions throughout, but I encourage you to reflect and realize that there is systemic and individual responsibility for all of us. So I would work through these questions. Where do you see yourself in this process? Just like Natalie and Sandy have touched on throughout, being able to see where you are and how you're interacting with, the groups that you work with daily and for yourself. We're here to learn. There are assets and resources abound. We can also, I'll put a link in the chat after this. That is a Penn State resource that we use and I use weekly, but even with our Advisory Council for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, we've got resources on our page that you can find on the Go PSU Sports website. That again, and that's just within our Penn State community. There are tons of resources out there for you to utilize and help educate yourself and your groups. And there are times that we all need to lead too, sometimes reluctantly, just as Natalie touched on. It's going to be uncomfortable sometimes to speak up, but it's important to show up and continuing to do so. And we're counting on you, and others are counting on you to do so. So keep that in mind. Use that brave space. Step out and to be courageous, and we got you. And then review your team and their roles on the train. I love the idea, like having that diverse group and embracing that piece. Knowing that someone fills the gaps that you have, that's important in inclusion and belonging, and it's just going to make your group better. You'll get fresh ideas. You'll find things that you didn't know before that they're bringing into your community. So definitely review that and get your homework done. But that's all we got. Nellie, I'm turning it to you.
All right. Thank you guys so much. You know, what a important topic to lead off our summit, and something that each one of us in each one of our units, you know, can really look inside to kind of see how we can improve in those areas. You know, we do have about 5 minutes before the 50-minute mark comes around. If there are specific questions, we can pop in the chat box, or you can simply unmute yourself if anyone has a question. I do have one question, and hopefully this can kick off maybe something else. And just in looking at what you guys have presented today to us about looking at what we do on a day-to-day basis, let's say unit heads that operate and maybe organize different groups. Let's say we are going to take a an effort over the next little bit of time to make sure we are leading things correctly, and in being inclusive and being, organized and making sure everyone is comfortable. What is step one for a department head, even if it's just a small department? What may that look like for us?
I'm happy to take that. It's really exactly that, Nellie. It's having the conversation. It's kind of stating the value, and that this is something that we embrace, and why, and then let's talk about how we're doing. I don't want to call it an evaluation, but how are we doing, and create that safe space for the conversation, for the feedback, and then go from there. It's going to take bravery the first time. Again, it's that track that goes someplace. Maybe it sounds like in what you've given us as the question, that maybe that unit's not been there in terms of starting these conversations. So it will take bravery, but it takes bravery from a unit head, a leadership standpoint, and then it takes bravery to pull all those chairs up to this table to start that conversation.
Yes, ma'am. Understand. Thank you.
I can agree with Sandy's offering there, and share that I think it can be a helpful first step to talk with your leadership about how closely aligned they feel like their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are with the mission. So to sort of reflect back with leadership, and to then solicit feedback in multiple ways, because I think just as that slide that Sandy was going through about the different ways people communicate, it might be really helpful to have a written way for some individuals to provide feedback, as well as a verbal way. So making sure that you have sort of lots of different ways to gather that data. I think it can also be helpful to have a consultant. So if you have someone who's the head of one department and they have a trusted colleague who's at their peer level, that might be a good person to serve as a bit of a consultant, or kind of like some back and forth with them, as well as talking with whoever oversees all the departments. So someone like Sandy would be a good person to, like designate who could help with this effort. And I think it's important when you're soliciting feedback to ask both, what's something that really makes you feel included in our meetings? How is that communicated to you? As well as what could we be doing to make sure we're including people that might have divergent voices at the table, or may not be sharing as much. Like, I think it's important to ask both, because it can be easy in gathering data to just go one direction, and kind of like confirmation bias. If you look for something, you'll typically find it. So important to kind of get both sides of the coin. And again, acknowledging we're not seeking some perfect place. We're trying to do better than we were doing 6 months ago, better than we were doing 2 weeks ago.
I'm going to add to that too. I think I would encourage you not to have the mindset of checking the box. To be able to say, hey, I'm hitting diversity, equity, and inclusion. We had that conversation. I'm out. So that was really uncomfortable to have that conversation, and now I don't have to do anything because I did it. This is an ongoing, as we're saying, this journey, this destination, we keep going. And you're probably going to mess up your first round, and that's okay. And you can admit that. Say, hey, I'm trying. All I know is that I'm trying. I'm showing up. And I would love for feedback on how to do this better for all of you. I love Natalie commenting on, let's get both. What are ways that I lead for you to feel like you belong and you feel included in this group? And what are ways what's going well, what's not going well? Those are great questions to be able to, one, strike conversation, and two, to have people participate. I think, Keith, I saw your question in here about, something memorable of a unit head or leader. I think asking the question of, what are your thoughts? Listening to it and showing that you've listened. It's one thing to ask the question, but being able to hear that feedback, apply it to your group in a way that works. Obviously, you're the leader and you're making those decisions, but being able to accept that feedback and do something with it would be the pieces that I would add. Keith, thanks for the question. And Nellie.
Yeah, Keith, in response to your question as well, I would take a little bit of a different tact, and I'll be honest, what absolutely comes to mind is the leadership that our student athletes took last summer in the wake of all of the racial injustice that has been occurring, and that was brought to light in the way it was last summer, and the response of our student athletes and them taking a leadership role and wanting to take those steps down the track. I was just, and obviously I know they had help and guidance and mentorship along the way. But I still am just incredibly grateful for their courage and they're jumping in and getting on the train.
All right. If there are any other questions, please do not hesitate to put them in the chat window or just unmute your phone. But again, just wanted to say thank you so much, Sandy, Natalie, Christina, for this. The amount of time went far beyond the 50 minutes that we had here, and we really appreciate y'all's time. Thank you so much. And we'll take 10 minutes here. At 2 o'clock, we'll kick off our next lecture. Thank y'all so much.
Thanks, everybody.